I don't take joy in saying this. It's just something that I've noticed. The Mountain West might be gone in 2 years.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with all the realignment, coaching carousel, and transfer portal craziness of the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get yourself started. Ohio State, Michigan, all coming up on today's show, but I just can't shake this thought. Everything that Oregon State and Washington State have been doing as they've been left behind in the college world of realignment has been about keeping themselves stable, steady, relevant, competitive for 2 years. Everything is being done in 2-year increments. There are payments that they would owe to the West Coast Conference, who their non-revenue sports are going to be affiliated with for the next 2 seasons, that they would owe if over the next 2 years they pull out of that contract. And they've got a football schedule set for 2024. And they could readily make one for 2025 if they were able to get 2024s on such short notice in what I've dubbed a Mountain West Plus schedule, in which you have Mountain West opponents, 7 of them to be exact, and then you have power opponents that you try and find elsewhere out there. But those all feel like temporary stopgap solutions, and their commitment to the West Coast Conference Yes, to the West Coast Conference, not the Mountain West Conference. We'll get back to the Mountain West in just a moment, is 2 years away. And speaking of the Mountain West Conference, I told you we'd get to it. That's a league that has a tremendous basketball presence at the moment, a more than respectable football brand, could very well generate annual college football playoff contenders for the G5 spot. I've talked about Boise State. They have now added 3 legit wide receivers to go with Malachi Nelson. They're going to make some noise in that conference and push for one of the 12-team playoff spots come 2024. But the Mountain West media rights contract has 2 years left on it. Just the 2. Curious. You know what else has 2 years left on it? The college football playoff media rights contract. Does that strike you as odd? Does that strike you as a coincidence? Because it strikes me as, shall we say, curious. It piques my curiosity to look at that confluence of events, potentially, and say, so you're telling me in the same year, Oregon State and Washington State, who are aiming not to be left behind in the realignment world as they have been and try to get themselves back into the main power structure of college athletics one day, that certainly is their focus. And with the war chest that they've gotten as a settlement from the 10 departing PAC schools that are going elsewhere, they have some resources to be able to do that. And if they want to keep spending at a Power 5 level, as they have stated they desire to do, even having a couple $100 million to split amongst them, you know, those sorts of revenues and whatnot, when you consider the drop-off of not being affiliated with the Pac-12 anymore, well, that can last you for a little while, but can it last you for a long, long time? It can at least last you for a couple of years, right? Paying coaches and paying players with NIL as well, and just revenue and facilities and upgrades and everything like that. But their affiliation with the West Coast Conference is for 2 years. Curious, very, very curious indeed. And then the Mountain West media deal, that's in 2 years. That's going to expire in 2 years. Oh, and the college football playoff, that contract expiring in 2 years. I think it is entirely possible a move gets made, as there is rampant speculation. Pete Thamel had a piece about this over at ESPN with regards to private equity, about disruption and a change, and something is going to change in college athletics. That's the narrative around this sport right now. No one knows exactly what the change is going to be, but they know the change is going to happen. And I think in the next shuffle, the Mountain West can get left behind and gone by the wayside, have it go by the wayside. The college football world could have it do. a la the Pac-12. Because Oregon State and Washington State are going to want to make a move. All of their present actions feel like Band-Aids. They feel like duct tape solutions. They are not actually replacing the upholstery. It's just throwing on some duct tape and saying, okay, that's good enough for now, but eventually we'll have to make a major shift. And the Mountain West, there has been a discussion before. This has been reported by multiple outlets that there is a presentation, at least, that has been made or thrown around, bought around, or shopped around, maybe is the best way to put it, with regards to creating a reverse merger between the Mountain West and the former Pac-12, which still actually exists, by the way. It's just that there are only two schools in Oregon State and Washington State. A reverse merger and a relegation model, which I think would be wildly entertaining and really, really fun. But Oregon State and Washington State have the option to go about rebuilding the Pac-12 and making it into the premier Group of Five football conference in the entire country. That's something that is completely and utterly feasible. And they could capitalize the way that other conferences did, going to get former Pac-12 schools, beginning with USC and UCLA leaving for the Big Ten, then Colorado to the Big 12, then Oregon and Washington to the Big 10, then everyone else to the Big 12. You know why that was all facilitated? Because the Pac-12's media deal had expired and they didn't have one. And so those schools didn't have to pay fees to the Pac-12 in a significant way because they weren't breaking a grant of rights to go to another conference. And with all of those factors, maybe Oregon State and Washington State know something that I don't know, that you don't know, that nobody knows about what could be coming in the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics. Maybe they don't. But at the very least, they are preparing, given the evidence that we have seen, to be in a situation in which they could capitalize on that confluence of factors. Playoff needs a new media rights structure. Playoff, I believe, needs a new structure as well. They've only got the 12-team format for a couple of years, but they're looking for a media rights partner for all of that. The Mountain West deal expiring. And the fact that if they continue along with the 12-team playoff and everything as we know it right now, that building the premier Group of Five conference in college football gives you the best possible access to the playoff because your conference champion, in all likelihood, is the team that gets in. Not a guarantee, but you could certainly have a shot. You could have access there. So I can't shake that thought that the Mountain West, when their media rights deal is just continue to follow that conference and see if they get a new deal. See if they are able to re-up it, because that is the next realignment move that can take place in college athletics that would start all of this stuff and all of these moves happening once again. Not on the same scale, not with the power conferences per se, but between the Mountain West and the ACC as well with their Florida State situation. I think Florida State's probably going to lose, but I'm not a lawyer, so what do I know? Those are the moves in the realignment world that we should be looking for. Everyone's got to be looking for what Ohio State's doing because, man, Ohio State is bringing in some big-time players and making big moves to compete in 2024. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They've got, listen to this, they've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. 122 million. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. There has not been a better opportunity for Ryan Day to win the national championship than right now. At the very least, win the Big Ten, but the national championship field is in striking distance as well for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes. I'm joined by Jay Stevens of Locked On Ohio State Buckeyes here on Locked On College Football. I look at all of these factors, Jay. Ohio State's offseason, how good of a team they were this past year, all the returners, Michigan's poised to step back. You got a number of things adding up. Am I crazy for thinking this is the best chance Ryan Day-led Ohio State will have to win at least the Big Ten, if not the national championship?
If you erase 2019, I would say yes. 2019's team for Ohio State was still the best. I mean, we have a complete season to say this. We don't know what 2024 is going to be for Ohio State, but 2019 was clearly the best team he's had so far, and clearly the team that you thought of all of them so far could win a national championship. 2024, however, you get a experienced quarterback in Will Howard. You have a defense that's returning almost all of their draft-eligible guys. Still Chambers goes on to the NFL. Michael Hall Jr. goes off to the NFL. You lose Josh Proctor, who's up. His eligibility is complete. But Lathan Ransom's still there. Troy Malowal's still there. Sawyer's still there. Tyreek Williams is still there. You're losing a lot of guys where it's like, you keeping a lot of guys where you're thinking, these are like day one, day two draft picks that are staying in Columbus. Can't forget Denzel Burke. So this team, like right now with Michigan and the expanded Big Ten, which I do think will make Ohio State better for the expanded playoff, this is a time for Ryan Day. At this point in his career, you got to win the Big Ten. You got to win and beat your rival to give yourself a shot to win the Natty at the end of the year.
I think the top two teams in the Big Ten pretty clearly have to be Ohio State and Oregon. You can put them in whatever order you want, but right now with the off seasons those teams have had, which kind of mirror each other in the way that they've had a bunch of NFL caliber players return, decide not yet to go to the NFL draft. It feels like an all-in sort of proposition. They add veteran quarterbacks. They have coaching staff continuity, but Ryan Day's got a new face on that staff, and that's Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator brought down from the NFL ranks. And look, I think Bill O'Brien has been good as an offensive coordinator in college. You look at what he did at Alabama, the numbers were productive. And yeah, Bryce Young was amazing, but it turns out good coaches help or can be helped by great players and vice versa. I don't think he had that in New England. We know he's going to have a lot of talent at Ohio State. Do you think Bill O'Brien changes the calculation at all as he takes over the OC role? And I hear he is going to call plays instead of Ryan Day.
Absolutely. You get a guy like Bill O'Brien, 30-plus years coaching, and not just in college, but in the NFL, primarily a college guy. He's called plays. He's coached for Saban. He's coached for Belichick. So you coach for those two guys, you know you're doing something right just by simply getting hired by them. It didn't go the way that people thought it was going to go in New England. He did have a Heisman Trophy quarterback in Bryce Young in Alabama. So he's done a lot of really good things, did really good things for the Houston Texans, did really good things for Penn State amid some of the weird and disgusting things that were going on with Sandusky and Paterno at that point in their careers. But I'm really happy that – hold on. My bad, bro. Something came in the background in my headphones.
You just getting some feedback?
Yeah, it was a my end, not yours.
Okay, yeah, you're good.
Played in the background. That's my bad.
Yeah, you're good. I'll edit.
I'm really happy. Start that over. Can you say the question again? That's my fault.
Yeah, we'll just go back to the whole Bill O'Brien point.
Okay.
There's defensive continuity on this staff for Ryan Day, but offensively, there's a new face in the room, and that's Bill O'Brien coming from the NFL. And look, I don't know that everyone was crazy about Bill O'Brien coming to town. I'm not one of those people. He's experienced. He is proven. He brings a pedigree to him. He is reportedly, from what I've heard, going to call the offensive plays, which came as a little bit of a surprise. But again, this guy's track record as an OC. You go look at what he did during his time at Alabama. The numbers are pretty undeniable there, Jay.
Yeah, they're undeniable, and I'm really somewhat glad that Ryan Day is at this point in his career, something that after last season I was calling for. Numerous people were saying Ryan Day should not call plays, not because he's not good at it. I think he's a phenomenal play caller. I just think he needs to be more of an overseer over the entire program. It'll give him a better chance to manage the roster, which is one of the toughest jobs for a college football coach at this point in the college football history. I do think Bill O'Brien, his track record going back to the Houston Texans and even the at Penn State, he has done a phenomenal job of getting a lot out of quarterbacks and sometimes the best years of those quarterbacks throughout their entire time playing college football. You go back to, I think it was Matt McLaughlin and I think it was Christian Hackenberg, and going back a little bit, you also get guys in the Houston Texans that weren't great quarterbacks, but Bill O'Brien got a lot out of them when they were down there playing football. You got Bryce Young and others. He's done a phenomenal job coaching up quarterbacks, and Ryan Day wasn't pleased enough with Kyle McCord this year to give him and say, hey, you are going to be the guy that we're going to rely on in the upcoming season to be QB1. Said, hey, we're going to go to the portal to get somebody. We would love to keep you here to compete. Bring in Bill O'Brien, going to get a lot out of Will Howard, we do believe, and calling plays the Ohio State playbook, not the Bill O'Brien playbook. I do think that's a great way for the Buckeyes offense to be consistent, not just in the passing game, but also running the ball as well.
Ohio State has had a great offseason, not just with the returning players, but the guys they've added via the transfer portal. Will Howard, the transfer quarterback from Kansas State who won a Big 12 championship a couple of years ago. I don't think he's had a situation there with the Wildcats where he can maximize his full potential. I think he's someone who has a little bit more. If you look at his numbers, they're not that impressive. His best season passing the ball is 61% through the air. That's not that great. I think he can hit another gear, not necessarily Heisman gear, but I think he's got another level. You give him Ohio State's run game, which now is Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. You got Caleb Downs coming into the room with a bunch of loaded guys on defense. Of those three impact transfers, Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, the running back, Caleb Downs, the safety from Alabama, who excites you the most?
Oh, Caleb Downs, bro. That's an easy one. That's a no-brainer. He's
over the quarterback. Over the quarterback. You like Caleb Downs?
Yeah, you've seen Will Howard's film. It's not like he's a future Heisman frontrunner or even in the conversation, the top 10 going into the season. Easily Caleb Downs. And I say that knowing a defensive player at safety is not going to be in the Heisman conversation, which that's not something that I'm looking for when it comes to these three. My second one would be Quinshon Judkins because he's just a dog. He is just a dude. I am I'm okay with Will Howard. Like, he satisfies and checks a box. But if you can get Quinshon Judkins to be a 1-2 punch with Travion Henderson, who has battled injuries throughout his career at Ohio State, that helps the Buckeyes running game, getting the experience that Judkins brings to Columbus. But then Caleb Downs, you're losing Josh Proctor, who played 6 years, got his best year at Ohio State in his final year in Columbus. But all of a sudden, you're bringing in a guy in Downs that lets Ransom be a guy that can just do what Lathan Ransom does, and you can trust Downs to be a phenomenal piece and do a little bit of everything in the Buckeyes secondary. That's great. But Downs also brings an element in the return game that Ohio State desperately needs. So Will Howard's a great replacement for Kyle McCord. I don't know if he's that much better or a greater quarterback than McCord. I do think, though, Judkins, phenomenal upgrade in the running back room. And Caleb Downs, I mean, talk about guys that could be future day one picks in the NFL draft. That's what Caleb Downs is.
So do you think that looking at Will Howard, and I really like him because I feel like he can be elevated by what Ohio State has, do you still feel with this Ohio State team with expectations sky high, and I think they should be, and Ohio State fans probably feel they should be, and I think a lot of national folks feel that way as well, is Will Howard performing at a level above Kyle McCord the biggest obstacle to the Buckeyes reaching their goals next year?
If Bill O'Brien and Ryan Day come together and say, we're comfortable doing the read option and letting the quarterback run the ball, yes. But if the thing is you're still using a quarterback in a traditional drop back passer set and you're not letting him run the ball, I don't really think Will Howard's that big of an upgrade. Will Howard has an element with his legs that he can utilize his legs at 6'5", 240. But as I said recently to somebody on a show, Justin Fields is a freak of nature. He's an athletic freak, and Ryan Day didn't allow him to use his legs and didn't really call a lot of the run plays that Justin Fields would have excelled at. CJ Stroud, not super athletic like Justin Fields, but could still move around a little bit. Didn't really have Stroud do that either. All of a sudden, you get Devin Brown, and I don't know why they use a QB package at short yardage with a quarterback. I would have much rather had a running back do that same thing. Would have been more productive. But now you got a guy in Devin Brown who's not super athletic either, but you're doing QB power with the quarterback. If that's something that you're going to see more of with Will Howard, okay, cool. But we haven't seen Ryan Day trust his starting quarterback to utilize his legs consistently, which makes me really hesitant to say that Will Howard is a major upgrade or even a somewhat of a better of an upgrade than Kyle McCord. McCord's a better passer. Decision-making was one that kind of got a little worse towards the end of the year. I think McCord's a better passer than Will Howard, which is what Ryan Day wants out of his offense.
Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes, talking all about the expectations for Ohio State, who I'm super high on. He's high on as well. Check him out on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Jay, thanks for stopping by the show.
No problem. I really enjoyed it.
You're not going to struggle to find everything you're looking for over at FanDuel, though. Happy Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers, just like everybody wanted. Do you sense the sarcasm? Yeah, okay. Anyway, to everyone who celebrates, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W, or 2, or 3, or 4, or maybe it's one W that comes from 2 or 3 or 4 if you're going to have a parlay. How about that? Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. $5 or more. That's it. If that wins, you get 200 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Times are good in Ann Arbor right now. It's a great time to be a Michigan Wolverine fan because your team, at long last, has climbed the summit of college football, won the national championship. And I have a message for Wolverine fans out there. It's not going to be that way again for quite some time. It could be 2 years. It could be 3 years. I think it's going to be more like 4, 5, 7, 10 or more years because Sharrone Moore has a difficult job ahead of him. As it pertains to 2024, I don't even expect Michigan to be a college football playoff team. That is not in my mindset. When I think about who could make a 12-team playoff, who's a Big Ten title contender, I don't expect Michigan to crater down and go 4-8, 3-9, or some disastrous Rich Rod type season, though I'll get to him in just a moment here. But Michigan is a difficult situation for Sharrone Moore to take over. Think about all the factors working against Michigan right now. And there's a lot of logic to hiring Sharrone Moore. He beat Ohio State as a head coach. He beat Penn State as a head coach. Those are two of the best teams in the Big Ten going forward. Program continuity when you've won a national championship, even with all the departures they're undergoing, there was a lot of inherent logic to hiring Sharrone Moore, the offensive coordinator, as the head coach up there in Ann Arbor. The job that he is taking over, though, is not as easy as it seems. This is not a Ryan Day taking the baton to be Ohio State's head coach and suddenly things are just rolling along. Because Michigan is a harder place to win than Ohio State. I don't even think this is Kalen DeBoer taking the baton at Alabama from Nick Saban. Because DeBoer, since that happened, has actually made some notable transfer portal additions. Now, they won't be what they were under Saban. That's the greatest coach in the history of the sport. But right now, I could tell you who Kalen DeBoer is going to start at quarterback. I could tell you who his top receivers are probably going to be. I can tell you several key offensive linemen who have got starting experience at a high level, including Parker Brailsford, who was the 10th highest graded overall center in the country, according to Pro Football Focus. There are a lot of key starters that they've brought in since the early days when DeBoer was dealing with what appeared from the outset to be a rather bare cupboard. They're starting to get a little bit more stock down there in Tuscaloosa. In Ann Arbor, however, it's a stark contrast because there are a lot of players who are not going to be back from this championship team. And Alabama's got a lot of players who won't be back. But Michigan is going to have to usher in a new wave of players without utilizing the transfer portal, even in the way or to the extent that Alabama has been able to do. So Sharrone Moore is taking over a roster that needs a new quarterback, needs a new running back, new offensive lineman, new receivers. They could lose their tight end. They might lose some defensive players. We don't know everything that's going to happen with Michigan in the portal just yet, though Sharrone Moore, one of the reasons that he's hired, in theory, is to prevent a mass exodus, as we saw with DeBoer down at Alabama. And I understand that. But when you're undergoing a roster turnover, the likes of which Michigan is about to see, this is going to be a challenge. So we don't know who's going to transfer. That's a literal unknown. And that's the first job that Sharrone Moore probably has. To be as competitive as possible in 2024, he's got to go out and recruit guys that are currently on the Michigan roster and convince them, hey, You want to stay here. Remember me? You know me? I'm your offensive coordinator, Donovan Edwards. I'm somebody who's been here before. We know what to do. I was your head coach for, a couple of game days this year, and we'll see how strong of a pitch that ends up being. But they've got to deal with that. They also have a quarterback situation that looks like, who's Michigan's starting quarterback next year? The Wildcat guy? Maybe. But is there a portal option out there? No, not presently. There is not an experienced transfer portal option now that Will Rogers has decided to stay at Washington with Jedd Fisch and the Huskies. So that was the most experienced, ready to play, plug and play, high floor quarterback available in the transfer portal. There aren't any other options like that. Everyone has already filled their roster slots up. And this is the problem with Jim Harbaugh taking as long as he did, along with the NFL, to make this decision to go be the head coach of the Chargers. Is Michigan now has their hands tied because their players can go into the transfer portal, but hardly anybody is available. You aren't going to have more players suddenly enter because nobody else's coach is going to leave at this late stage. So when you look at that situation, it's difficult for Sharrone Moore. He's going into a Big Ten, by the way, that is absolutely stacked. Ohio State is having a great offseason, one of the best in all of college football. Ole Miss is up there. Ohio State's up there. Oregon's up there. That's Big Ten Oregon, by the way, having a great offseason. And those are probably the top two teams. Oh, yeah, by the way, Julian Fleming from Ohio State, he went to go help out Drew Aller at Penn State, up there with James Franklin and company, who just had another ho-hum double-digit win season. Do you think Penn State's going to take a massive step back? I see nothing to indicate that is the case. Now, Penn State may not be the highest ceiling program in the Big Ten. We've seen their record against Michigan and Ohio State since James Franklin took over, but that's when Michigan had things kind of rolling under Jim Harbaugh. That's when Ohio State has had things rolling and will, in all likelihood, continue to do so under Ryan Day. What does Penn State against Michigan feel like now with Michigan completely reloading? A much different situation is the answer to that question. So roster turnover that he's got to try and prevent, quarterback questions, a loaded Big Ten, and this is a Michigan job on the whole that is not as attractive as it seems. Because Jim Harbaugh made it seem like it's a great job and it's a place where you can do a lot of winning. Even Jim Harbaugh struggled at Michigan relative to what he just did, winning the national championship and making consecutive college football playoff appearances. This is a Michigan team that finally got over the hump in their third straight trip to the 4-team playoff. And Jim Harbaugh was hired in 2015. Sharrone Moore could be a good head coach. Is he going to be as good as Jim Harbaugh? I've got my doubts. Not because I don't think Sharrone Moore is capable. He's clearly got some level of competency as a head coach on game days. But is he Jim Harbaugh? Because Harbaugh is one of the most successful football coaches we've seen in the last 2 decades in the entire sport. This is a guy who won at San Diego. This is a guy who turned Stanford into a national power. He brought the 49ers to the Super Bowl, and then he came to Michigan, which was in complete and utter disarray, and turned it around. And this is the final point I want to make here on Sharrone Moore and the difficulty that he's got in front of him. The only coach since 2010 to win at Michigan has been Jim Harbaugh. That's it. That's the only guy. And by the way, the other 2 hires, Brady Hoke has had some success elsewhere. Okay, that's probably the worst of the 2 hires. Rich Rodriguez did not succeed at Michigan. You can make the case it was a different world of college football, but there are still some underlying fundamentals that make me look and go, this Michigan job is not as easy as Jim Harbaugh made it look. And even Jim Harbaugh at times, remember, COVID year, 2-4, had an 8-5 season in there. There were calls for Jim Harbaugh to be fired, and he's not good, and he's not delivering, and all this sort of stuff. And eventually it all worked out, but it took a very, very long time. So even if Sharrone Moore is as good as Jim Harbaugh, he won't have a team that can contend for a national championship for 6 or 7 seasons. Harbaugh was hired in 2015, made his first playoff 2021. And made it 3 consecutive years, but it took a long time to get there. And I look at the record of Rich Rodriguez at Michigan. It was not good. It was ugly. It was bad. It was even worse than Brady Hoke. And you look at Brady Hoke's track record as a head coach and you go, well, he's had some splashy seasons, had a couple good years at San Diego State, done a nice thing here and there. But overall, you can look and say, all right, that one just didn't quite work out. Rich Rodriguez is a head coach who has won everywhere he's been except Michigan. Did you know that? Did you know? Go look at his record and why he was hired at Michigan at West Virginia. It was stringing together 10-plus win seasons at West Virginia. I noticed they haven't done that a lot since then. He's currently the head coach at Jacksonville State. He's winning over there too. They're new to Conference USA, and he's winning. He's winning with Jacksonville State. I believe their mascot's the Gamecocks down there in Florida. And you look at Rich Rodriguez at Arizona. He brought them to their only ever Pac-12 championship title game appearance and got them to the Fiesta Bowl, a place where they have not been since, or frankly, even that close. Eventually, he was let go there, but he had a successful tenure. So this Michigan job is really difficult, and we're accustomed to thinking of Michigan as a perennial top 10, 20 program. And Sharrone Moore could keep it going at some level. But the coordinators who take over, aside from Ryan Day, at big-time jobs, have a tendency oftentimes to run out of steam. And coordinators can sometimes seem like the right hire, and initially it might work out. Plus, don't forget this. I'll leave you with this particular thought. Michigan's defense, far more so than their offense, was the reason they won this national championship. Jim Harbaugh is taking Jesse Minter, the architect of that defense, with him to the NFL. This is going to be a difficult situation. I'll be pretty surprised if Michigan's a playoff contender in 2024. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.